Looking to you for the go. Good morning. We are going to call the March 17th, 2020 Scott County Board of Commissioners to order. And before we move on to some of these other things, I just feel like we got a little different day here before us, a little different setup before us. And I just feel like feel compelled that maybe we just open in a prayer, which I will do out loud. And if you're into praying, pray along in any which way you see fit. If you're not, enjoy the next 10 seconds as a holiday. And let me just open up in prayer. Lord, we're grateful to be in your presence today. We just look to you for all things, for guidance and wisdom, that we would make good decisions, informed decisions to glorify you, Lord. Thank you that you tell us you will never leave us nor forsake us, and thank you for sending your Son to redeem us from our sins, Lord. And you are an ever-present help in danger. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much. Please join me in the
roll call.
Roll call, yes, very good. We got to do a roll call since you see three of us on camera. We've got two joining in via phone, so take it away. We're going to do roll call votes for everything today.
Okay. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky?
Here.
Commissioner Wolf?
Here.
Commissioner Beard?
Here.
Commissioner Beer?
Here as well.
Commissioner Ulrich?
All right, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Excuse me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving on to amendments to the agenda. You may imagine that we have some, and we do. I'm just going to read through a list here. Agenda item 4.1, to recognize Robbie French, who is pulled. Thank you, Robbie, for getting everyone's living room furniture and patio items off the ice. We will be bringing that back at a later date. Also, agenda 5.2, we're going to pull. Do you want me to read through all of these, or just, okay. We're going to pull that item to accept the bid for sale and removal of a house is pulled as per Lisa Freeze, keeping the house if needed for quarantine. Handy. Agenda 5.7, to award a contract for the roundabout at County Road 2 and 91 intersection, may be pulled unless approval is received from MnDOT. It has not. We're going to add agenda item 6.2, and we're going to have a presentation on that to talk about the calling for an emergency declaration for the county. Also, we are going to move item 7.1 to award the RIIO grants. We're going to move that to consent as per staff. And the workshop that we were going to have post-board meeting is going to be postponed. Does that cover, I'm looking to my left, does that cover everything
I
so
think
far?
you've covered everything so far.
And the morning is still young, so that could change. But members, with that in mind,
I would make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'm looking over towards the phone. No, so in that case, again, all votes are going to be roll call, so looking to you, take it away.
All right. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Commissioner Beard?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich?
All right, the agenda is approved as amended. Now we're going to move to item number 4, recognition of interest. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Approve the minutes of the March 3rd, 2020 County Board meeting. Are there any changes?
Mr. Chair, I'll need to abstain from that motion as I was not here, so I'm notifying my colleagues on the phone that one of them will need to be involved in this motion.
All right, we have one abstention.
I would make the motion to approve those minutes, and I think you actually can make the motion, but you have to abstain.
Oh, okay. I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the March 3rd, 2020. Any further discussion on that item? Hearing none, looking to Tracy yet again.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky?
Abstain.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Beard?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
And Commissioner Ulrich?
Aye.
Minutes approved. Now moving on to number 4, and I'm looking to the back of the room. Recognition of interested citizens. This is a great opportunity, even with social distancing, to take an opportunity to address the board for any and all reasons that may not be on the agenda. Just please limit your discussion to 5 minutes.
Oh, you mean, is that okay to hold this? Okay.
Not for very long.
We got a
Test.
great sink across the way. When you're done, you can wash your hands. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name's John Miser, and I appreciate you guys showing up here today. It is a crazy time, that's for certain. I mean, it's really bizarre to go and see your grocery stores with no toilet paper in it and see the kind of mass hysteria that can be whipped up. That part is true. Now, whether this virus thing is really the virus thing, I don't know. You know, that part I really don't know. You know, we have a thing called an electron microscope that can take a digital fingerprint and can actually identify something like that. And the thing I've been trying to do to kind of slow down the mass hysteria is just to begin to ask everybody, who do you know in your family, your friends, that actually has it? I do know that toilet paper's gone, but everyone I've been asking so far, except there's a lady here today that claims that she knows somebody, and actually over in Europe through a friend of a friend, that actually knows somebody. But I know people in Europe and Korea, and nobody has told me that they know anybody, except they've heard about Tom Hanks and the Prime Minister and those kind of things. So I hope that maybe we can settle down and begin to have some rationality, because certainly people have been whipped up into a state of fear, and now we have new terms like social distancing, you know. So I'd like to know if there's actually is a problem. So the real brief piece that I wanted to come by here today is I sent an email to you all a little while ago, and a driver's license for the person has been suspended, and there's two conditions precedent that have to happen according to 171.186. And so public servants are to follow the law as well. They're not allowed to ignore the law. And then on this Minnesota statute, 171.186, it states that there has to be two conditions. Has to be a written agreement, and there has to be 3 times. Well, there's 3 times for the person, but there is no written agreement. So the public authority coming out of the county attorney's office and the child support office have issued a notice to the Department of Safety. And the Department of Safety, when I've questioned John Harrington over there, they don't have any evidence on their notice that can actually say they got those 2 pieces of information. I made a data request of them 13 weeks ago, and they still don't have anything. They say they can't even provide that information, yet they took action. So I've asked over at the county attorney's office, do you guys have a copy of the written payment agreement? Because you needed 2 conditions in order to push a button to go suspend a person's driver's license. And I've just heard crickets. I haven't gotten an answer. So I haven't gotten an answer. So that was the second question when I came to you all this morning. I said, could I get a copy of the county's public information, their liability policy for a tort? So I'd just like to know if and when I could get a copy of that so I can take a look at that. And the last part that I'll just end on is, Dave, thank you very much for returning my book. I'm going to wrap it up here in about 30 seconds. But I had given him this book called Words and Phrases, which is a book that's used by judges to define words in court cases over the last 372 years. And in here, there's over 200 pages. And I'm guessing, Dave, did you find once where it said a man or a woman? And you don't have to answer, you know, but I know that you didn't. It's not in there. So never once is a person ever defined as a man or a woman. Yet every one of our rules govern persons. Yet nobody's a person here. The best you can do is appear as one. And one of these days I'll come back and I'm going to tie it back into you from Scripture to actually show you what the law of who made us, what he considers about persons, and really what the difference is. Because I think it's interesting, I think it's very important that we understand what law is. So I want to thank you very much for providing this, and how would you like me to wipe down this microphone to participate in safety for you all?
Not funny, but definitely something that's topic of the day for sure. All right, thank you very much. Are there any other interested citizens in our presence today? Seeing none, we're going to close that session and move to item number 5. This is the consent agenda where these items will pass in one motion. Been vetted by staff and tend to be non-controversial, so I'm just going to read through the list. 5.1, adopt resolution number 2020-039, awarding a construction contract to Valley Paving, Inc. for the overlaying, sign replacement, and seal coating for various county highways. As mentioned earlier, 5.2 is pulled. So moving to 5.3, adopt resolution number 2020-041, authorizing entering into a road maintenance agreement with the city of New Prague for the maintenance of County Highway 15. 5.4, adopt resolution number 2020-042, authorizing an amendment to the 2020 highway operations budget. 5.5, adopt resolution number 2020-043, awarding the 2020 annual pavement marking and striping contract on various county highways to Traffic Marking Services, Inc. 5.6, adopt resolution number 2020-044, authorizing entering into agreement number 1035704 with the State of Minnesota Department of Transportation, City of New Prague, and LeSueur County for work on Trunk Highway 19 located in the City of New Prague. And the 5.7 was pulled. 5.8, adopt resolution number 2020-049, authorizing entering into a cooperative construction agreement with the City of New Prague for the County Highway 15 roundabout. 5.9, approve record of disbursements and approve claims. 5.10, approve the appointment of Pamela Casilius, and when I meet you, you can correct me on that last name if I missed it, of Commissioner District 1 to an at-large position on the Scott Watershed Management Organization Planning Commission. 5.11, adopt resolution number 2020-046, approving the Credit River Township Watershed Management Plan dated February 2020. 5.12, set a public hearing date of April 7th, 2020 at 9:15 a.m. to consider adoption of the Scott County Public Health Nuisance Ordinance number 31. 5.13, approve the request for preliminary and final plat of Faith Point Lutheran Church consisting of one lot on 12.1 acres and approve the conditional use permit for Faith Point Church to construct and operate a church in section 35 of Helena Township and three-way development agreement containing therein. 5.14, approve the request for preliminary and final plat of Mix Acres Second Edition consisting of one lot on 11.74 acres. Randy Kubish, applicant, and Randy and Lisa Kubish, property owners in section 33 of Cedar Lake Township. 5.15, approve the addition of 2 full-time equivalent off-levy positions to provide MnChoice's assessments. 5.16, adopt resolution number 2020-050, approving a 3-year agreement between the County of Scott and the Minnesota Public Employees Association, Sheriff, non-licensed essential dispatch supervisors effective January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2022, and rescinding resolution number 2016-197. 5.17, approve payroll processing of personnel actions, and then as amended, we are going to add 7.1, adopt resolution number 2020-048, awarding 2020 recycling, infrastructure, innovation, and outreach grants. And that, looking over it one more time, is the consent agenda. And so I'm going to look to Tracy for a roll call vote once we get a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the consent agenda as read.
And I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a
For the
second
18 items, right?
for the agenda as amended earlier. Is there any discussion? Looking over to the phone, just to make sure.
Mr. Chair, it's not 18
Is it?
because we took
Because we
2
took one
off
off.
of
That's
there.
right.
Two out, but we added one.
And
One,
added
so
7.1, so as amended
16,
earlier.
just want to
Okay, got it.
clarify.
There, I like it, I
As
like
read,
it.
yep.
Any discussion? Tracy?
Okay. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
And Commissioner Ulrich.
All right. Consent agenda passes. So now, moving to the next item, 6.1, receive the COVID-19 update. Thank you very much for coming today to give us an update. I know things are changing rapidly.
Good morning, members of the board and members of the audience. My name is Scott Haas. I'm the Director of Emergency Management and 911 Communications for the county. This morning we wanted to give you an update from Emergency Management and Public Health about the information that we have regarding COVID-19 and the actions that we are taking. With me is Alexa Runquist, our Public Health Preparedness Specialist and our expert in that area. I'm going to pass the floor to her so she can talk about what we know about the disease and how it's progressing across the world.
Commissioners,
Chair, good morning. Thank you for having us here today. So often I'm here to talk about our planning and our preparedness, and I'm here to show you what we're doing in our response and use all those times we planned.
Excuse me.
So what I'm just going to talk about is just about the disease today, and then I'll pass it back to Captain Haas. So for starters, let's look internationally. This morning, the World Health Organization let us know that there's 167,515 cases worldwide. That's 13,903 new cases a day. We have 6,606 deaths, with 862 deaths new yesterday. So the World Health Organization was updated this morning. So if we look to the US, we have 1,678 cases in 49 states with 41 deaths. In Minnesota, we saw our first case on March 6th. We saw our second case on March 8th, our third case on March 10th, and yesterday we tested 19 new positive. And so we have 54 cases, and that's as of yesterday. We have no new updated numbers from MDH today. They come out usually around 10:30, so we will most likely see an uptick in that.
And those are statewide numbers, just to.
Statewide numbers, yes. So 54 positive in the state of Minnesota. That is affecting 13 counties. That does some outlier counties to the south of us, but mostly in the metro, with Hennepin seeing over 20. We don't know exact numbers of counties right now. Our neighbors in Wisconsin have 21. Our neighbors in Iowa have 22, and North Dakota has 1 to 5. They're still in testing. So testing is a really big thing. At the state, as of yesterday, we tested 460. Total, we've tested 1,893. It's important to know at this time, the only people conducting the test is the Minnesota Department of Health, and positives had to be sent to the CDC. Yesterday at 1 o'clock, the CDC lifted the need to send to the Center for Disease Control, which allows us to identify those cases much more quickly as confirmed positives. So that's what I have for an update. We see daily an increased number of positive testing, but with numbers so low this time, it's hard to give a percentage of disease progression because it only takes a small number to create a large percentage. What we did see in Minnesota with our 19 new cases was that our ages quickly changed, and we saw them go from ages of 19 to 94. But the 19 new cases, all but one, were under the age of 60, which is not the norm for the disease. And that is why you saw our community mitigation strategies of common places of bars and restaurants. That played into that factor because that age group wasn't following the recommendations of social distancing, and so we had to take it one step farther. So I can entertain questions now, or we can pass it to Captain Haas.
Can you say that again? There was 19
New cases.
And then all but one were under
The age of 60.
Okay.
Yes.
On the new cases.
Of the new cases identified yesterday.
Could you update them a little bit too? Before it had previously been travel related.
Yes,
That's
so
beginning
yes.
to change as well, correct?
Yes, exactly. So also in those cases, we found three of them were community spread. So person to person. Previously, all of our cases had been connected back to a travel. Yes. I also wanted to note that we will be receiving citizens of Minnesota back from the Princess cruise ship. We don't know our numbers in Scott County now. It's still being disseminated to us, but we do know that we are going to have travelers coming back to Minnesota from those cruise ships as they are going back to all the states.
And just a question on that, that was the one that was quarantined.
Correct, they have been quarantined, yes.
So they're coming back post
Quarantine,
14 or more day quarantine on that
Correct.
particular ship.
yes,
Just for clarification.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just for the watching public, you talked about how testing's done by MDH. and I think healthcare professionals are giving a really good direction about who needs to be tested, who doesn't need to be tested. But the testing actually is occurring at the local hospitals or clinics and then being sent to the MD, to
So,
MDH? Is that true?
collection for testing occurs at our local healthcare facilities. So, St. Francis, our clinics are able to test for that, collect the necessary samples. It is quite a bit that they need to collect for this, and then they send it to MDH daily.
Great.
So,
Thank you, just wanted to clarify.
yep, exactly. And it's important, I don't know the exacts, but they've been really doing a lot of work to make sure that it is not a barrier to get a test, and we've seen great strides forward in making sure that insurance companies are covering that or they're at no cost. So,
Alexa, the other thing that might be of interest, right now, our hospitals feel they can cover the testing, right? They haven't reached out to the county yet to provide any of those services or mobile things. Where are we at with that planning?
yes, thank you, Leslie. So we are in close contact. We met with our hospitals yesterday, actually twice, and we are in full support of them, but at this time they feel they can support that testing, or the collection, let's be clear, the collection for testing. But we know that as hospitals themselves get the ability to test and clinics themselves, that may change. So that is ever rapidly changing. And we have staff that are working diligently daily with our partners at our 2 hospitals and our clinics.
The other thing is for food security and some of those necessities, you've done some work like on our web.
Yeah, so I was really proud of our team yesterday. They came in and with the governor's announcement on on Sunday, letting people know that schools would be closed. We knew there would be some food security issues, and we wanted to make sure we were on top of that. So yesterday we were able to produce a document that is now out on the COVID-19 Scott County webpage that you can get to it directly from the main page. What that is all the community meals that were prior going on. We confirmed the continuation of those, and that is out there. Today you're going to see a document that outlines how schools are going to be providing the meals for the next, starting tomorrow. They are required to continue that free and reduced lunch program, and how they are going to do that so parents and family can get that food. We also know that this doesn't just affect our children, and affects many of our community members. And so you're also going to see a document produced that has all of our faith-based partners that we're working with and what they're continuing to do in the food security area.
And maybe just for sake of clarity, maybe say again where people can find that information, because part of it, I mean, the great news in all of this, if you go on Facebook or any other social media, I mean, there are groups, private groups, public groups banding together to try to make, I think New Prague made the news last night for, a student trying to organize things. So we're Minnesotans, right? We want to help each other out, but is there a single source, which, I mean, so many people are trying to do good things, that can be a tool for people? Where's ours? And then will ours be more?
So it's ever rapidly changing. That is someone's full-time job, is to ensure that we are updating our social media, our web pages, and our documents. And of course, translation, we're working diligently to ensure our documents are translated. So Scott County's website has the information. It's a COVID-19 page. You link directly, to it from the main page. And there it's outlining childcare options. There's some changes within taxation that are outlined in there, and then food security is outlined on there. Now we know there are many volunteers that come out during times of emergency, and we are referring those back to me currently, and then I am working diligently with Kara Abadson in our community volunteer coordinator to ensure that we can get those together and get people connected. So.
Awesome. And just the food security is that kids that used to go to school had lunch. It's not a security issue with the food supply. It's making sure kids have meals to eat.
Commissioner,
Just
you
to be
are
clear.
correct, and my hope is to change the verbiage around that today to be a little clear. food security is the word that we use, but what it is about, it's about food access.
Yes.
And it's not just for our children, or that has been our main focus. We realize that the needs of our elderly and our shut-ins and those who are just unable to stockpile are going to come into play very quickly. And so we are making sure this is a community response and not limited to our children, but all of our vulnerable populations and all of our citizens.
Love it.
Thank you for that work. I know that you're continuing to work every minute on this, and we'll continue to update things, and thank you for that.
And thank you for this opportunity. I will let Captain Haas give you more of an update.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexa. So I just kind of want to talk about some of the actions that the county is taking. The county has implemented a wide-reaching incident management team that is working through all of the issues that this situation is bringing before us, and thinking about how this truly impacts our community, how this impacts us as county employees and county operations. Commissioners, we had a large group of county staff working through the weekend to make sure that we're doing the right thing, staying up on information, and delivering the right information and the right practices for our people. We've implemented a high number of changes already. As you came into the boardroom and saw that we've distanced our chairs, the county has implemented additional cleaning protocols to make sure that we are adequately cleaning public spaces and county facilities. We are looking ahead to see how the county is being impacted. County employees who have the capability of teleworking and performing their job duties at home have been extended the ability to work from home to get their jobs done. We've also extended flexibility for those county employees who may not be able to work during the day with the school closures. If they have to take care of their kids during the day or they have other conflicts, we do have some flexibility for many of our employees to allow them to complete their work as needed, as some of these tasks aren't as person-to-person facing and can be done at 9 p.m. When another spouse would come home. So we're looking at the work of the county and how we keep our employees safe so that we can keep the lights on and continue to deliver great service to our community. Just want to provide you an update on some of the objectives that we have been working through our command team to give you an idea of some of the things we're thinking about. We're actively working through implementing the county's continuity of operations plan. This is a plan where we identify the critical and essential services and services that may be able to wait for a week if we don't have staffing to do that. So we're looking at those services that cannot stop on a daily basis and looking at services that may be able to be delayed by a week or two. And we're looking at staff that could become available in other areas to come support those critical functions, and how we would have the new world of business look like. So we have some staff that maybe or may end up shifting into different areas of the county and working in some different areas. Again, we're working with the staff members to identify the right skill set, the right capabilities, and working with them to ensure that there's not a conflict that occurs because of that. But I'll tell you from talking with staff members, and I think everyone here in the room knows this, our staff is gung-ho, ready to do what they need to do to solve problems, and we have a lot of flexibility within our staff. So there's a lot of credit that goes to our staff that we have. We're really working with our partners, as Alexa talked, both in the first responder community with our police and fire, as well as reaching out to our community groups. I think Alexa touched that very well. We're looking at what the impact is to our staff. We have a number of conditions that really have impacted our staff. Some of our staff at some point in time may become exposed to this disease and may need to be quarantined. Thankfully, we're not in a situation where we have a lot of staff. I have staff that's quarantined right now, but we're thinking ahead and making the appropriate adjustments for that, and thinking about what our situation looks like as a county and how we keep functioning, how we keep prioritizing the right business as things is moving forward. We're looking at the county staff members who have been disrupted by the school closures, and we're looking at making sure that they can continue to perform their work, again, on either through teleworking or through flexibility and scheduling when that's a possibility. We are also looking at some implementation of some additional changes to our payroll and our personnel and compensation policies to allow staff to work through this crisis and continue to do their jobs and continue to function as members of our staffing team. We've looked at a lot of different functions on how we keep the business going, how we make sure we continue to deliver great service as a county, and some of the things that we can do differently. If you've been downstairs, you notice right now there's a rush of people trying to get licensing. What is happening in some of the areas around the state are that those areas that are public facing are being closed. Hennepin County did a disaster declaration last night, for example. In their declaration, they actually closed libraries, human services, service centers, and the DMV, or the licensing centers. It wouldn't surprise me if we're getting a drive of people because they're seeing that other areas are closing and people are trying to get those key things done as quickly as possible. I can tell you that we're working, Administrator Vermillion's been working with our local representatives to talk about, can we get some things changed at the state level that would adapt and adopt for our community. If they can't get tabs renewed because of the service disruptions, can we get an extension for them? So we've been reaching out across the board, looking at our county operations, how this impacts our community, how this impacts our citizens, and looking for ways to even change things within many of our areas by putting dots on the floor to remind people that you should stand on the dots and not get too close to the people next to you. We've also put up some screening to protect our employees, so if someone is sick and is unknowing of that we're protecting our employees in that way. So we're taking a ton of actions to work through this. Our Emergency Operations Center is activated. We had a really long day yesterday working through it, and a longer day on Sunday working through these issues. And we're going to continue to work through this. This is a very flexible situation, and things are changing very dynamically. We're getting a lot of good information through our partners with Public Health and their liaison with the CDC and with Minnesota Department of Health. And as they get more information, we're relaying that information, how that impacts our community, how that impacts our workers here. So the county is taking a number of actions to take care of making sure we're doing the right thing during this confusing and sometimes scary time. And I want to bring this back in a personal story. This is impacting people in many ways. This is scary. What's on the news can be really scary. If you're looking at death tolls in Italy and seeing 350 to 400 people dying every day in Italy, and knowing that this is what this disease is doing to an area, quite frankly, it's scary. A lot of people are nervous about what's coming, if we've taken the right actions as a country, if we have the ability to even know what the impacts are. This is a scary time. I can tell you my dad, who doesn't live in the county, but in a very personal story, my dad's an accountant. This is tax season. He has face-to-face contacts, or he doesn't make any money. He's spent over 40 years building his business. If he has to shut down, that business is gone. And I know that there's tens of thousands of stories just like that. People who are in the restaurant industry who don't know what the future looks like for them. People who are in the bar industry and the entertainment industry, especially in Scott County where we have River South and we really engage people to come and play here and work here. This is going to have a significant impact, and this is going to be a long-term event. We are going to go through waves of this, the first being the exposure and the disease, and the second being the consequences of what that does and what the economic changes that we see as a result of that are. So I'd stress to the board that this information that's coming is changing every day, and we need to stay alert to it. We're taking actions to keep you as commissioners informed, and you'll start seeing some things that look a little different here in the next day or two as we provide a regular situation report to you. But this is impacting a lot of our constituents here. I don't know a person in the room or a person that I've talked to that doesn't have a personal connection to someone or a family member who's very deeply impacted by what this means or the disease. We have a lot of family friends who are immunosuppressed or in the high-risk category. And like I said, this is a scary thing as our community, and it's key that we as a county continue to operate and continue to implement our plans that have been in place, continue to deliver the services that we can, and alter the services that we can't to keep us stable as government. When we act in a stable manner, I think that's very key for our citizens to see and understand that we're still going to keep the lights on, we're going to still do business, and we're still going to be there to protect them. When they call 911, we will be answering that phone, and we will get help to them. That's not going to change.
Well, and I think on that note, maybe it makes sense to say that again, because we are open for business, but that could change, and it likely will change, and things will ebb and flow, but that particular piece, maybe just say that again, 911, you call in a time of need, ... and,
So, again, looking at our critical services, we are not shutting down 911. Even if we bring in staff from other areas, when someone needs help in this community, this county will be there to take care of them. We are not shutting down emergency response. We are not shutting down critical functions of this county. We are here, we are looking at alternatives, and this is where our continuity of operations plan comes into key. We're looking at areas where some staff may be in jobs that doesn't need to be done for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And those staff are more than willing to come in and help us in areas that are essential. So if we have a staffing crisis that occurs, we have a plan in place to make sure that we continue to deliver those core services. We're going to be here for our community. We're going to continue to deliver the services that our community relies on the county to provide.
Just a couple thoughts on that, Commissioner, and Scott's absolutely right. So as they've prioritized over the last couple days, those top things, of course, 911 is at the top of the list, and we're already talking about how do we get some folks that have those characteristics over there learning how to answer phones and support. Obviously, the jail, the JAF have to stay open. There's certain things in courts that have to continue just based on our country. They have to continue to happen. The signal systems will continue to run. But there are some things that probably will change, and people need to be ready. This is fluid and changing daily. Hennepin County changed last night at 8:45. Ramsey County changed at 11:45 what they're doing. I would guess Dakota, Olmsted, and Anoka will change service models today. Our goal had been to try to keep some of these open for the public, following social distancing, following ways to keep our employees safe. But today Pam is going to tell her HHS staff that we are not going to have contact with our clients at this point, at least for 2 weeks, until we make sure we have that plan in place to keep people safe. We can do things over the phone, we can do things over Skype. There are certain things we will have to do for families that have requirements for visitation and things like that. The planning and resource area has already shut down to minimal areas, but they have people that can be deployed who have certain skill sets, I think, that we can be used in other areas. So we are working through it. Right now, libraries is meeting. Hennepin, Ramsey have been keeping them open. You heard the governor say yesterday, apply for unemployment and apply now. Certain people that don't have computer access, they need that Wi-Fi, they need to be able to connect. So we're trying to figure out how through appointments or phone calls, we can keep those things open and still do the social distancing that we need to do. So it will be fluid. We'll keep communicating with the public through the website, through social media, but we are trying our best. In those critical service they've identified now, your leadership team, we will keep those up and running.
yeah, I would just say, I personally, I'm not an anti-government guy, but was it Reagan, you know, the old, knocking on the door, hey, I'm with the government, I'm here to help, like, oh. But where I'm going with that is I snuck in the back of the room on that Sunday night. I didn't sneak in, I had the badge in, so it was all safe and secure. But, and I will say, and I think, well, maybe I'll have our, we certainly believe this. Our staff in this county has a passion to do the right thing, and has planned for, I don't know if you can ever plan for something exactly like this, but the plans are in place and we're working through those plans. I mean, I think we can always plan for all of these scenarios, but here we have something right in our face, literally. And it was, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was impressive to be there and to see and hear the passion of the leadership. And I know that carries down through the organization. It was awesome. It was awesome. I mean, we are a big and growing county, but we're not that big that we can't get in a room 6 feet apart and have these discussions and look out for the people that we serve. I love it. It was awesome. That's what attracted me to county government, quite frankly, and hats off to everybody and gloves on too. So thank you for everyone that put in that effort and everyone that's going to be putting in effort and changing, being flexible, because that's what we need to do. We're all in the soup together, and we're gonna get through it, and we're gonna get done. It can be scary, but calm and confidence and professionalism carries the day. No fear here. We're gonna push on and do what needs to be done in the way it needs to be done. And just for the folks that are out in the county, be patient. There's a lot of, well, not a lot of debate. Oh, it's overreaction, underreaction. You know what? That's a discussion for another day. Here we are. So we're gonna march through. We're gonna do what we can do to get through this. And thank you so much to the staff. It's awesome. The people of this county need to know that there are people in government that are getting it done. And that's awesome. So thank you, everybody. Anything else on this particular?
Commissioner
Topic?
Ulrich, Commissioner Beard, any questions there?
Good presentation. I'm grateful that we can attend via Skype, so we can still be active and engaged, even though we've had to alter our travel plans because of the current urgency.
So that was, you're not looking for action, that was just an update for 6.1, but now we are going to move to the agenda item 6.2 that was added to the agenda early on, and that is to hear about the need for an emergency declaration for the county.
Again, good morning.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beard and members of the board. I'm still Scott, and we're still moving ahead.
Good,
with
nice.
keeping things
Look at that,
stable.
continuity, awesome, love it.
So as we talked about, this is a very dynamic situation. Things are changing. We're working through implementing a lot of plans to make sure that we're taking care of our community as well as possible. But there are certain things that we have to address. There are, as everyone's seen, a mad rush on toilet paper, even though the supply chain for toilet paper really is pretty stable. The key is to understand that people are nervous, and when they get nervous, they focus on things that they do every day, and people need toilet paper. So we see impacts. As a county, we've had a number of our cities who have already done disaster declarations and declared local emergencies for their city as they've needed to implement changes quickly. As a county, we've reached the point where it's appropriate for us to declare this disaster and request a local disaster declaration. We're doing this in front of the full board so that it is a full declaration instead of doing it just through the board chair, which has a much shorter time frame. However, now is the time. We are, like I said earlier in the previous item, we've activated an emergency operations center. We're looking at things, and we already know that we need to make some increases in some of our supplies of cleaning supplies and personal protective equipment, and we're gonna need to start making some purchases here. So my request this morning is that the board will adopt resolution 2020-052, which is declaring a state of emergency in Scott County due to the COVID-19 pandemic that's impacting the county. Happy to walk through the resolution itself for members of the board and clarify that. I'm kind of at the will of the board and what you would like me to explain here.
Well, I guess I'm just gonna start with a question that this declaration that you're asking for, this is, nothing new has happened. There's not some new emergency. There's already been a federal declaration. There's been a state declaration. Many cities have already declared. But this is a mechanism by which it allows the county to be able to go back to FEMA to have some of those costs reimbursed from the federal level, correct?
Correct. So there's a number of reasons why we would request a declaration. One is to ask you as the commissioners to give us additional authorities as a county to allow us to do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do in normal business. So this is one tool that we do. One of the point of the resolution is that you're going to direct me to seek out a disaster aid regarding this. And that's a component of every disaster resolution. At the end of the day, we are going to spend additional expenses taking care of our community, and this situation is no different. I also want to advise the commissioners that this is probably going to last for at least a couple of months. So as we do have expenses that come in, It's going to take a long time before we get to the point of being able to submit those expenses for reimbursement through the traditional FEMA process. However, in this case, there is some funding coming from the state for our response, additional funding coming through the CDC for our response. So there's going to be a really big mix of dollars coming in, and we have to be very careful on how we track the financial impact of this, and then make sure we don't cross any I's and dot any T's, so we can get it the most appropriate money back for us. But this provides direction to start seeking that funding so that we can take care of the financial interests of the county.
I'm seeing two questions here, so.
I just wanted to add a couple things. So Scott handled the emergency declaration of it really well. There's a couple employment ER things here, and Lori is in the office, or in the audience. But one of it is, we are one of the few counties that actually had, Hennepin already had it, but where our employees could go in the hole for sick or PTO by 40 hours. Based on quarantine numbers and things like that, and what the other metro counties are doing, we are asking the county board to allow that to be 160 hours of PTO or sick if people have to be off work to be quarantined, or to be able to take care of somebody that's quarantined if they're a caregiver, something like that. That is something based on this that we are asking. The second thing is, we have a current policy where some employees have an extended sick leave balance. They tend to be people who have put those in there and have moved them from PTO into that, probably longer tenured employees at this point. But our policy is they have to use 40 hours of PTO before they can go in there. We're asking you to waive that at this time based on the pandemic and the need to be able to use those sick hours and not maybe bankrupt everybody's PTO, so when this is through, they're able to take care and be with their families as well. The final one is one that we learned through the flood process. We had some staff, I'm not talking about division directors or those types of folks in this situation, but we have people like public health nurses or other professional staff that might be called in to work extended hours. And we had no mechanism for paying them based on our current exempt policy. And what this is asking for is the flexibility for some of these folks as they start to work extended hours, if we need to be able to pay them at one time the regular rate of hourly pay. We had already, based on our flood experience, been working this into your new ER policies, that if this hadn't happened, would probably be coming to you sometime in May. But this would allow us to do that for this crisis, and allow us to make good decisions on how we're treating employees as they have to work extended hours. And that's what the additional 3 things from employee relations are as part of this resolution. The others are pretty standard when we've declared emergency, asking for Scott to have authorities to be able to look for funding and those types of things. Lori is here if you'd like to ask some specific questions regarding those 3 parts of the resolution.
Well, and just one clarification point on that, because you mentioned the last time we maybe didn't have it was probably for flooding or something, we didn't have an emergency, but this would allow us in those particular cases to be able to have that.
Correct. We had
reimbursed.
people, Scott was in a different position at the time, but people like Ron Holbeck or Joe Wida or Jake Bulk and other staff that are in that professional but aren't a director level, that worked a tremendous amount of hours, and FEMA actually advised us that we should put some policy in play like this, that we are able to compensate them if we have a policy.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
So one time the regular pay, so double or?
No, just their regular pay.
Just the regular pay
Regular
and
pay.
whatever hours they, okay, got it. Straight, okay, got it.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I just wanted to highlight those items in the declaration, or in the resolution and declaration, because as Captain Haas has talked about, as many people have talked about, working with our staff, having flexibility is really paramount. We have a lot of uncertainty in the next few weeks. So those are very important parts of this resolution that I think should be highlighted.
This does not impact, if I heard you correctly, the timeline that typically would happen if it was like a flood or a natural disaster event. Like, we're not worried about starting too early, starting the clock, as you put it, for this particular case, correct?
Thanks, Commissioner Beer. So to clarify, in a traditional disaster, an event happens, we have a finite disaster period. If we look through history at a public health emergency that was of this scope, we really have to go back to 1918 when we had the Spanish flu that across the world. There was no such thing as FEMA back then. So we're really in some unprecedented times as far as how disaster aid is going to work. My belief, based on the best information I've been able to obtain, is that the window is going to be wide, knowing that this is a long-term event. So I'm not worried about, at this point in time, I'm not worried about jumping the gun and getting into too short of a period, because I believe that everybody from the local to the federal level understands that this is going to be a lengthy process until we're completely done talking about COVID-19.
Fair enough. Is there any other questions while we've got them?
Mr. Chair, I will make the motion to adopt resolution number 2020-25. I know you got a question, but I'll make the motion first and you can ask the question. Is that all right? Okay.
Yes.
So to adopt resolution number 2020-052 declaring a state of emergency in Scott County due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Further discussion?
Yes.
Take it away.
Let John Ulrich go first, and then I have two questions. This is Beard.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Scott, I just want you to comment on the concept that this is unlike any other disaster in that in typical disasters, we're responding to what happened. And we sort of deal with what we've been experiencing. You know, if it's a tornado, we deal with the after effects, or if it's a flood, we're dealing with the after effects, or maybe some advance, but not a lot. This is one where we've been told by the national health experts that actions we might take now might seem like overreaction, but they're really not, because we have to take action in advance of the need rather than after the need, because if you do it after the need, it's going to be too late. Now, I don't want to, cause fear or anything like that, but for example, my daughter lives in one of the counties around San Francisco. As of last night at midnight, it's now a misdemeanor for them to leave their home except for essential services. Now, it seems to me that if we're a week or two behind what's happening on the West Coast, maybe we are, but we have to think about a little more radically than I think we are. Like, keeping our service center open seems highly questionable to me. And I want you to comment on being in advance of this rather than reacting to that this is unlike another disaster. Can you say more about that?
Absolutely. So, this is very unprecedented. The situation is very unprecedented. Typically in the disaster process, we do have a short-term duration event that has a long-term impact that we go through a normal recovery process to after response phase of a disaster. What we've learned and what the lessons learned out of this disease so far is we're watching and keeping up on the impact to the international community is that if we fail to take action now to protect our community, this will be widespread. It will absolutely be widespread. The actions that we take now can functionally delay the impact to our community, which is very key because we have limitations on our hospital capacity and our medical system is not designed for half of our population to get sick and seek medical attention. The actions we're taking now to mitigate the risk within our community are all designed to reduce that impact on our medical system and protect as many people as possible. By implementing these solutions, the goal is we truly keep more people healthy and prevent the disaster becoming bigger. So it's really opposite in many ways of what a traditional disaster happens.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Commissioner Beard. Can I ask two questions?
Absolutely.
All right. The unprecedented part is what concerns me a great deal, because in some ways we're trying to prevent what we don't even know may or may not happen. The political and human cost, though, is if we don't, and it does happen, then we look derelict in our duty. But the penalty for, well, how to phrase the question, and you might have covered some of this because I was offline for about 3 or 4 minutes here when my Skype dropped out. Excuse me. But, you know, we've got private individuals having like birthday parties or weddings or church services or a small restaurant that says, I can't afford to be closed and wants to stay open, but isn't compelling people to come in, but they're coming in voluntarily. Are we prepared to take the steps San Francisco's taken now, where if you're caught outside of your house, you can be arrested and fined? And how far does this declaration go? And where are we? I get that's a concerning question that a lot of us have. How far is it? How far are we prepared to go? And what will this resolution, if we pass it today, what does that trigger?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Beard. I just want to highlight the country that we live in is strong because we have a constitution. We have a constitution and a Bill of Rights. And even a disaster declaration, especially a disaster declaration that occurs at a county level, does not have the ability to infringe upon those constitutionally guaranteed rights that we have as a citizen of this country. The key for us is to take steps now that are appropriate, that are proportional, that are going to stop the crisis from getting bigger. There is a financial impact absolutely to these small businesses, as you probably heard my story of my dad's business, which may go under.
Yes. Yes.
And that is real. I absolutely personally understand that, and I think professionally understand what that does to our community here in Scott County. However, if we fail to take these actions now, we're not talking about people losing their businesses. We're talking about many, many more people who are going to lose their lives. This truly is a point where if we look internationally and see the difference between countries who immediately took action and did isolation compared to those that allowed a lot of continued social interaction, the death rate in those counties are very different, or I'm sorry, those countries are very different. So as we look to what we know, and we have to be very open and honest that we don't know what the future has in store, but as we look at the information that we're presented with, these are appropriate actions to be taking. This declaration at the county level does nothing to infringe upon people's rights, and that's something that we value.
Yeah, Commissioner Beard, this is Leslie. You know, I think the governor, because people weren't social distancing yesterday, took an extreme measure in closing the restaurants and bars. So that was done on a statewide level. The county certainly had no intentions. And as you know, we've used disaster declarations even when we've had flooding. We haven't forced people to leave their homes or things if they've refused. So it's more been actions about funding streams and trying to do the right things to recommend people than telling people we're going to close off the streets at this point. So no, there is no intention for something like that. It does give us, though, a little more authority if something in the next 3 hours change with consultation with the chair and vice chair and folks to say we're going to close down certain services if it was advised to do it. Right now, we are still following MDH. The governor asked us to keep the libraries open, to do things for like using computers and those types of things for people who only have access, but to continue to follow the social distancing and the things that MDH is recommending.
And I would also, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you finish your thought, please.
So we're confident that had the two places with the biggest death toll now, China and Italy, had they been more aggressive in the steps we're taking, that they may have avoided some of this tragedy. And that's what we're hoping to do with this declaration, and in connection with the state. I know the state actually passes the laws and has the enforcement powers, but you're confident that had these steps been taken in those two countries in particular, we may not have the enormous loss of life that we're seeing now.
Correct. I'm confident based on the information that we have that the key to the spread of this disease is people congregating and people being too close to each other. And I see Alexis shaking her head. I rely on our experts in public health because they're in tune to what the updated information is, and they are getting updates every day on what is the new information, new guidance. At the end of the day, this is all about exposure to those water droplets when people are coughing. If you're too close, you have risk of being exposed to that. So as we take actions to keep people separated, even if it means disruption of our entertainment venues, and at the end of the day, if we keep people separated, this disease has a much better chance of burning out before it impacts a larger percentage of our population.
Good. Last question. When do we know it's over? Is there a date certain when this resolution expires, or will we have to come back and repeal it?
So there is no expiration date on the resolution itself. So one of the key elements to understand as commissioners is that we've asked for a very specific authority in the resolution.
Yes.
The resolution does not extend widespread authority beyond what you are being asked to resolve here. So this does not give us the authority to take actions that are outside of policy unless it's to the point of the resolution. So we are limiting what we're asking you to do as far as payroll adjustments or personnel policy adjustments, but understand that you are not granting us the authority to take an action that would violate people's civil liberties. We're not asking for that, and doing that is a conversation that we would have to have with the board and with the attorney and with the sheriff before we would ever even consider doing that.
Okay, so there is no expiration date built into this resolution. Will we have to come back at some date in the future and repeal the resolution, or does it just kind of fade away?
So with the resolution, you're declaring a disaster and authorizing these key elements of changes.
Yes.
At the will of the board, if you chose in the future that you did not want these things to continue, you would certainly have the authority to do that. However, as we wrote, and I'm pulling up on the screen here, as we wrote these resolutions and asked for specific authority, you see that they are specific to COVID-19 and what we've asked for as the ability to go deeper into the PTO bank for employees. It's restricted and limited to the COVID-19 language. So this is not something that's going to go on forever.
So Commissioner Beard, Scott, this is a little unusual too in that the state and the feds have already declared these emergencies. I would guess they're going to play a role in this timeline as well.
Absolutely. In a traditional disaster, truly the disaster impacts local government first. We do the disaster declaration because we run out of resources to maintain that disaster, and we ask for help then from the state. Once the state has exhausted reasonable resources to deal with that disaster, we ask for assistance from the federal government. This has been very different. In this case, this has been a federal, nationwide disaster. Information that we're receiving from the CDC ultimately gets fed to Minnesota Department of Health, excuse me, and then to our local public health personnel who are the boots on the ground to deliver these key services. So this has really been opposite of the traditional path that we see within a disaster. And again, this is a very different process than if we were experiencing a flood.
Okay, thank you for rolling the screen back there, whoever did that, so I could see that first part. As I mentioned, my Skype dropped out right after Scott was telling the story about his dad's tax business. And so I missed a big part of this presentation, but thank you for letting me catch up and for helping me understand how specific the resolution is. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any more questions.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to clarify again, for an abundance of clarity. Some of us have received some emails and phone calls, and I don't know if it was because of some of the things out on the interweb, quote unquote, whether they're real or not. Well, it's on the internet, of course. So it must be true, right? True. This is not a declaration that we are looking to ban gun sales, gasoline, toilet paper, or set up martial law. This, and there's been no hint, no wink, wink, nod, nod with the board and staff about anything like that. This is simply a mechanism by which we can
It,
have a means in which to get some expenses reimbursed and do our job.
It is very, very specific, and it's written that way. It allows Scott to obtain eligible disaster aid from state and feds. It is allowing us to allow our employees to go into the hole with sick leave in a crisis. It is allowing us to waive the use of PTO. It is allowing us to pay some exempt staff if they're working a lot of additional hours during this. And then it is allowing us to coordinate with these local governments and assist in a disaster recovery. Very specific to that.
And Commissioner Beer, I'd add, as the county's Director of Emergency Management, I'm sworn in the role of being the Director of Emergency Management to protect the rights of its citizens. Also, as a police officer, I'm sworn to protect and uphold the Constitution and protect our citizens' rights. What we're talking about are extreme measures that are not in compliance with either one of those oaths that I've taken to be here before you.
Well, and I think we've got a record that shows that, but in crazy times, I just wanted to be abundantly clear on that. So, we've got a motion, we've got a second, we had some robust discussion. Is there anything else from Scott? I don't think so. We're good?
I'm open to any questions you still have.
Any last minute questions? Clarifications? Tracy, if you would, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
And Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
We've adopted resolution number 2020-052. Thank you all very much. Godspeed. All right. Somehow this feels oddly appropriate that now we're going to discuss taxes.
Well, Commissioner, it's interesting because you're going to see all your board meetings moving forward be very transactional, right? We're canceling workshops, we're canceling some of our bus tours and things like that at this time as we're focusing on other things. But these statements do go out. We had made a commitment over time that we would keep the public updated and what were the impacts and continue to educate on some critical dates. I know Michael and Cindy have both asked DOR to waive some of these dates. We don't know where they're going to be at in that process, so I don't know if Michael will have more on that. But we felt this was the only presentation item besides the update on COVID that we would keep today because these statements did just go out in the mail.
Nope, awesome. We just always need to have a little humor in times of craziness. So, Michael T., take it away. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I was going to say my presentation has never felt so insignificant after hearing that update, yet we did just send out 50,000 notices 4 days ago, and people are going to be looking for this information. So hopefully we can get through this quickly and answer any questions that you have. And then towards the end, I've added some information on how our processes will change due to the times, and hopefully it not impact our service level and the fairness of the processes, but just that we're going to go about it a little differently. So with that, I'm going to tell you what we've seen in the marketplace, what changes we made for the 2020 assessment based on those market activities, and then what options our property taxpayers have for appeal and relief. And I always like to start this out by giving you the timeline because this is the most confusing piece of the entire process for most of our taxpayers. And I'm just going to highlight that from October of 2018 through September of 19, that is the market we were analyzing. Those are the sales that we look at. It's a 12-month study based on the Department of Revenue's rules. So we just sent out these notices in March, one envelope with 2 statements. Color coded, so the 2020 tax statements for this year's taxes are gold. The notices that you can do anything about right now is the purple ones, informally appeal with us. And so we'll be focusing on the information contained in there. You do still have an option to go to tax court on the gold notices, and we'll touch on that later too. But this is all impacting with the purple notices your taxes in 2021. Similar to last year, a little bit of change, historically low interest rates. foreclosures filings are down and have sort of leveled off. And the supply of homes for sale is extremely low, particularly in some sectors. And those are some of the forces that we're seeing impact residential values. Beginning with the interest rates, they've fallen even further than we saw last year. This is a longer look all the way back as far as I can go on Freddie Mac's website, showing that the interest rates we're seeing now are historically low compared to any other time. And then zooming in even back to November of 2012, when they bottomed out previously, we're actually at about that same level and technically slightly below that level with interest rates when I ran this recently within the last week. So that's access to money. So that plays a big part. People can afford a lot more when the interest rates are lower. Another big piece of what we see going on right now, I apologize if some of these are cut off a little bit at the top. The foreclosure rates are down and have leveled off to pre-2003 levels now. So the 71 number may even come down again, though that's somewhat preliminary based on the 2019 foreclosure filings not being finalized. The process takes quite some time, but it looks like that could have been potentially our new normal going forward is somewhere in that range, obviously significantly down. And of course, foreclosures make a huge impact because they're competition. So when you're trying to sell your house traditionally and you're going up against a foreclosure property, it tends to bring all the values down. And this is kind of another way to look at this. Back in 2011, half of our market, the blue line being traditional sales and the red line being lender mediated, which would include short sales and foreclosures. Half of the market or more at certain points in time was comprised of those lender mediated sales. It's almost immeasurable now. It's down below 2%, getting close to 1% now. And hopefully we'll see that continue. Month supply, of course, supply and demand is a big piece of what drives price for anything. And month supply of homes for sale is extremely low. This trend will look very similar on the next slide, which focuses on a price point. So you kind of have to memorize the scale on the left side. We're at about just under 3 months. This is overall for Scott County. But when we go in and focus on properties under 250,000, we're actually now down to about a month, if not a little bit less. So this particular sector, this price point, entry level, workforce housing, whatever term you want to use, properties under 250,000 is significantly deficient in supply. And so what that does is it lowers the amount of days that those sit on the market. So for Scott County overall, 26 days on the market is the median. And then I've intentionally segmented these price point groupings because it'll come in play when I talk about the value changes that we actually made later on in the presentation. But it's important to note here that Scott County median is 26. If we go under that 250 price point, it's 19 days, less than 3 weeks, as of February. A zoomed out view of the 7-county metro area average sales price. And so if you look at this, it's somewhat of a smooth line. It looks the shape is kind of like a W. And we see over the last year, 5.2% from January 19 to 20 increase in the average sales price. When we zoom into Scott County, the line gets a little more choppy and it kind of starts looking more like a V. The shapes don't really matter. I'm just pointing that out to you because I'm going somewhere with that. And Scott County is up 4.5%, just slightly below the metro area. And I think that makes sense considering that we also have one of the higher median and average values in the 7-county metro area. Carver tends to be a little higher, but we're right up there. This is what happens, you notice how choppy it gets and how it's no longer a V or a W, it's up and down and depends what you're looking at. These are townhomes in Prior Lake. I believe under 250,000, I'm sorry, I can't see that. It may just be all traditional sale townhomes in Prior Lake. Up 6.5%, so now it's a different change, and if we look historically, it's not a smooth line at all, and it goes up and down. It doesn't follow a general trend that people are anticipating when they just look at news stories or hear about market updates. So we get a lot of calls that say, well, we heard that, you know, the values went down for a few years and then they were coming back, and this kind of shows you a little bit of what we do when we really start digging into areas, property types, and segments. And so the overview on that, just to illustrate that, we have one county, we have 18 jurisdictions within the county, and specific to residential, we've got 162 residential neighborhoods that we've segmented for analysis for our property appraisal. And the reason for that is they perform differently in the marketplace. So this is an example of the neighborhoods color-coded as we've segmented in Prior Lake. And so in addition to just the area you're in, we're also looking at price points, home styles, ages. Are older homes performing better than newer homes in the marketplace? We want to take into account all these things. So it's important to keep all this in perspective when we talk about residential values going up 4%. That is going to make a big difference depending on where you're at. Industrial property, I wanted to highlight a couple of these property types, and industrial was one. If you read the quote from Cushman & Wakefield's Compass Executive Summary, it's difficult to find enough new adjectives to explain just how robust the industrial real estate market is in the Twin Cities. Unprecedented demand is fueling the sector and pushed the vacancy rate down to the lowest ever recorded for this market. Keep that in mind when we get to the slide and we talk about how we changed industrial values in a little bit. And then I've also highlighted that warehouse rates are at the highest in a 4-year span for Q3. We have seen obviously a huge demand on industrial warehouse as people move to storing goods and mailing from fulfillment centers versus the in-store. Apartments are another property type I wanted to focus on. Last year, Scott County had the lowest vacancy rate in the metro, still very low, second lowest, and the metro average is 3.1, Scott County's at 2.1. Historically, very, very low. And so maybe that upticked a little bit due to some of the construction we've been seeing, which I've outlined in the chart there. Number of units added, this is metro area data, was up again for 2019 and projected to even go up another 5,000 units based on what's either in the works or under construction right now. We saw rental rates go up again. One bedrooms 6.3%. I think last year they went up 13%. Two bedrooms up 3%, and I think last year that was around like the 6% range. So they didn't go up as much this year, and that may be due to some of the new units coming online, helping with some of that, but still up significantly. And then I've added a new sale to our slide of fourplexes that we shared with you last year. You know, there are some differences in the property. I would say the top two are more similar and the bottom two are pretty similar, but you can kind of see the progression here. We've now got a fourplex this last 2 Novembers ago now that sold for $500,000. So that price per unit is surprising us, and we're having trouble keeping up with some of these value increases in some of these rental properties.
Michael, can I ask then, so that one in the lower right, so it's a $500,000 building?
Yes, correct.
4 units?
4 units.
How much would they get for rent on a month or something like that? Do you know?
You know, those particular examples, I'm not 100% sure, but I would say in this $1,300 range,
Okay.
That's the average, and I think that would kind of be competitive with apartments versus the fourplex units. Could be slightly lower.
Okay.
So what changes did we make? Well, first of all, we recorded new construction being up 13% from the year before. All sectors are pretty well increasing. Residential, I think we saw more houses built, but the actual amount of new construction is relatively flat from the year before. And then this is the average percent of residential value changes. This is what, kind of the summary of what we did with residential values, with the most important information probably when these calls come in. Overall for Scott County, we increased residential values 4.1%. You can see that impacts roughly 45,000 properties. And the reason I segmented them out by the price range is there are kind of two different stories being told. If you are that entry level property, if you're with the workforce housing type properties, we did see, generally speaking, and in the cities, I should add, more increase. The prices are just going up faster based on obviously the supply and demand issues. And then over 500,000, we actually had quite a few areas where we decreased values on average, not by much, but you can see those highlighted in red. We actually even had one township where the overall went down a percentage point. And of course, this is all based on the sales that we have compared to our previous assessed values. So I'm going to touch on that on the next slide, but I also wanted to point out of the over 500,000 column, the only real significant increases, of course, and probably expected, were on Prior Lake Shore, and significant being 6%. Hopefully not as significant as sometimes they're familiar with, but still worth noting because it stands out in that price category. And then we had some pretty significant increases in a couple of the smaller cities and even the larger cities on those smaller price points. And what you're seeing there is shift of tax burden. So this is exactly how the system is set up to run by the state legislature. You know, we don't have authority at the county level on most of how property taxes work. We follow the markets, but when you see segments going down and others going up, you know, that's a shift. So we have to be aware of that too. So,
Mr. Chair, Michael, can I ask, so these, over 500, you know, some people back 8-10 years ago built a house $1 million, they go to sell it, they're gonna get 600,000. If they're building $1 million house now, do you think they're gonna get close to the $1 million? Is that what this is telling me in some of these townships?
that's a great question. I struggle to answer hypotheticals for the future all the time, and we've seen, depending where you are and what your setup is, we've seen houses in that price point sell for more than they did. I mean, in a lot of these, we are saying they're flat or up a little bit. And last year, we increased values quite a bit in some of these areas based on the sales we had. So,
Could we look, I don't know if you have any where somebody maybe built a house within the last 2 or 3 years, and then maybe see what did they get for that now? You know what I'm saying? Because it just seems like, you know, people will, you know, build them up here and then sell it down here a little bit, and I'm still, because I still see that out, you know, in the townships, and that's, so anyhow, just something interesting to look at.
I will dig into a couple examples and try to randomly select a few and get those emailed out.
Don't dig too hard, but it just, you know, it's funny how anyhow, okay.
Yeah, it does happen. So why or what criteria do we use when we determine what value changes we should make? It's all based on the state sales ratio study, and trying to ensure as best we can that property values are reflective of what what people could actually sell their properties for. So this is a kind of a zoomed out look at our different jurisdictions where we left off last year. After we made all of our changes and we sent notices out, this is where the medians fell in these jurisdictions. After the sales came through, we were at these red dots. And so the reason I like to show that is here we're all hovering around the 95% median line, give or take 2 to 3 points. And that's where we leave off. And then the market happens. And this is kind of illustrating that it doesn't happen the same for everybody or every area or property type. And I think what you'll note if you kind of look at those red dots that are at 95 or higher, Credit River, Helena Township, New Market, and Spring Lake those are also the jurisdictions with the highest average property values. Though, what that's telling us is they were relatively flat, or even maybe went down a little bit if the dot was at 94 or 5, and then now it's up at 97. And so that's why you saw on the previous slide, a couple slides ago, some of those flat areas are decreasing when people are generally thinking, hey, the real estate market's doing really good right now. The green triangles is where we believe, and it's their projections at this point. We won't have Department of Revenue's final numbers till June. This is where we believe the median ratios are now and where they will end up.
So Michael, one of my questions was New Prague, you know, they're looking at quite a significant increase for those under 250,000. And some of the explanation is that we had them undervalued according to the sales ratio a little bit because they were below that 90. Is that right?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Weckman-Brecky. The only thing I would disagree with is that we had them undervalued.
Okay,
And
I
that
shouldn't
goes
say it
back
that
to
way.
this chart,
Yeah.
where they were actually at 95%, kind of middle of the road. And based on market activity, they came in undervalued
There we go.
after 12 months of market activities. Otherwise, I agree 100% with what you said, that this slide is reflective, and the reason I put the arrow on that jurisdiction is because it went up the most.
Okay,
And-
so a better way to say that is the market over the last year outperformed even what we thought it would, or it had such high market activity that I'm just trying to make sure that I have I want to be able to explain accurately why that increase.
Yeah, and even saying that what we thought would happen, I wouldn't go that far, because we're certainly not trying to predict the market here. We're just trying to look retrospectively at what happened and saying we're going to end with New Prague at 95%. The sales are going to happen. The market is going to outperform other areas in this case. 100% right about that. And that's going to drive that ratio down over that 12-month study period further than other areas, because appreciation. There is also the element of it's a totally different sales set. So, you know, if 100 properties in that city sold the year before, it's a new 100 properties,
Right.
maybe a couple overlap. So there, in a smaller township with less volume of sales, that can have a huge impact on these ratios too. So, but I think your point is exactly correct. It's the market performed better in those areas. That's why those ratios tend, in those cases, those ratios start from a lower point. We have to bring them up more to get them all back in line. And this is kind of the historical look as far back as I could go when I made this chart. And it focuses on the cities, because the townships a lot of times don't even have qualified studies. They don't have they don't meet the sale threshold. So this kind of shows you, we're trying to get things somewhat in line so that levels of assessment are similar in different jurisdictions, so that we don't have one jurisdiction at 103% and another at 91%, even though those are both acceptable. Agricultural and rural land values. This is the one that came up a few months ago, where the Department of Revenue gave us a 19.284% annual trend, which means they analyzed this metro area without Ramsey and Anoka, of course. That's the area that they determined, and they said, when we put all those sales in the hopper, we're seeing that values are and we can with certainty tell you it's 19.284%. The issue with that is the metro area is different than the other areas of the state. We've got ag land that's being used for ag but has development potential. That's a huge influence. And so we appealed that trend, and we were successful in receiving no trend. But just to illustrate on a hypothetical sale what that would have meant, assume a property sold for $1 million on January 2nd of 19, they would have adjusted that sale price to 1.19284. It would have actually been a little bit higher because it compounds, but that's for this example. Now, if we had that property valued at $950,000, under their time adjusted method, we would be at a 79% ratio, when in reality the direct ratio is 95. So that gives you a little feel. We would have probably went up 16% more than what we actually did if we would have been unsuccessful with appealing that trend. And it also didn't make sense when you look at this map. Our neighbors to the south and west were receiving negative trends, and this is supposed to be for agricultural land.
Right. Mr. Chair, I just want to publicly thank you again for that work, Michael, for noticing that, for pursuing that with the Department of Revenue, really important to our rural townships. Their tax statements that they received yesterday, probably in their mailbox, would have been a much, much bigger shock. And I agree with your analysis. If we look at rental rates, if we look at sales, that trend that the department was trying to put on us was just wrong.
Yeah,
I
agree.
can say that, right?
Well, that does feel like a win. It
Yeah.
feels like a win that the process in this case worked, that you wrestled that to ground. So I too want to say thank you for that, because that's a big deal.
Well,
Because
you're
if it worked
welcome.
there, we're hoping that the process works elsewhere when we need it to, like right now.
Yep. And anytime we see something that does not make sense for our residents and does not make sense for our analysis, we're gonna always challenge it.
Yep.
And so in this case, what we ended up doing was a little less than a percentage increase, 0.8% countywide. The larger cities and smaller cities, yeah, because of development pressures, we did have to increase those a little bit, similar to residential values. And then I included the map, just, most people probably kind of assume this, but values tend to increase when we move north and east in this county due to the development pressures. And Green Acres value were held flat at 7,200. Another point that I included in my appeal, which we didn't have till last minute, was if agricultural values are going up 19%, why are you holding our Green Acre values flat? Those two things together don't make sense. And the example of what this does for the taxpayers, assume a 100-acre farm in Shakopee. Our value is going to be $7.8 million if it's got that development potential. That's our high residential value. Some people would say it's even too low there. They're going to be taxed on $720,000 if they're in that Green Acres program. So the point being, don't push people off of the farm by increasing their property taxes. And then the historical values comparison there as well. Commercial, industrial, and apartments. So all the way on the left, I have our 2019 finals. What we did and where our ratio left off at. And then I have our 2020 going in numbers. And this is an example too of, that I mentioned before, very small samples, particularly on the industrial and apartments. So you're gonna have 11 properties one year and 10 totally different properties the next year. It makes it really tough sometimes, but in this case, industrial, as you read earlier, is an extremely good market to be in and has been. And we've seen that in the sale prices. Obviously, when you have 10 sales or 11 sales, you left off at 96% almost. The next 10 sales come in and you're at 73. It requires a lot of action, and in that case, we left it just over the bar there at 91.3%. Because we had some flexibility, and 19% is significant. Apartments up 8%, and then industrial was more kind of countywide. Small cities and large cities are going to feel that. Commercial was a little bit different, where the smaller cities, for the most part, were left relatively flat. The larger cities, and of course, commercial is a huge bucket. Retail, office, service, all those things. So there's quite a bit of variation within that category. Short-term rental properties has been a hot topic, so I decided to add one slide here. We received a memo from DOR in May, and it was a 3-page memo I summarized just in that box. It's basically saying if the property's primary use is, then classify it this. And the middle box there is the one that we're focusing on. If it's short-term rental, which is becoming more and more prevalent, if that's the primary use, classify it commercial. And the difference between homestead or seasonal recreational and commercial can, easily triple your taxes depending what jurisdiction you're in. So they sent this memo out due to some questions that were coming, particularly from northern counties that have companies buying up, 10, 15 cabins, LLCs, and renting them out that have been on as seasonal, recreational, or residential. But they're kind of competing with motels, and hotels, but they're just individual properties. So they didn't give us really any guidance on how to determine primary use. And I think assessors did it a number of different ways. Was it used for half of the year, counting by days for rental, then it was going to be short-term, and they defined short-term under 30 days. And so they asked assessors to review in their county these property types and change them to commercial. We did look online at what was publicly available, and even then you can't always get addresses, and you're trying to look at the map and the picture and match it up to our GIS, and so it really didn't seem fair to single out some of the ones that we could identify versus the ones that we couldn't. And we didn't have a whole lot anyways. We had like 50 to start with. Of those, like 40 some were homestead. So we're like, well, if you're homestead, your primary use is homestead, we're gonna take you off the list. And so we didn't intentionally change any from that review process, but we do have a couple of properties that were already on as commercial, that were like, there's like a crafting retreat and something else that kind of qualifies as a short-term rental. So there's legislation, currently proposed legislation to add this that would make short-term rentals basically non-homestead tax rate. So if that goes through, it's kind of like all that for nothing type of situation, but we don't know what's gonna happen, so we'll keep an eye on it and we'll report back if we end up making any big changes in the county based on this.
Is there one city that's kind of really looking at this right now, or not for us?
Within our county, not that I'm aware of. I know that, looking at it, I know Prior Lake has had discussions. I talked to one of their staff, but I don't know the context of what they're looking at, so I wouldn't even want to try to comment.
Yeah, I didn't know if people were knocking on your door or.
I've had a couple calls over, from different areas.
Thanks.
Yep. So appeal options, what can taxpayers do? So the first thing I want to do is point out that we're focusing here on the purple notice that came in for this appeals process. I've highlighted with the red appraiser phone number there. That's where the relevant information is for you to get, that you can call that person and start the process, get information, or go through an appeals. The gold tax statement that came, the appeals process is done for that notice outside of going to tax court, which you have up until April 30th. Much more formal process, obviously. It's going to court. And then the green box in the bottom left, we do have an option where you can sign up. If you look at those two notices, they both include a code specific to your property. Don't use the one we're displaying here. That you can go in and sign up to get notices sent electronically. And if you do that, you'll also be the first to get them usually. Before I get too far into the appeals process, tools available to people. One of the things we get a lot is, hey, I'm not a real estate agent, I'm not an appraiser. You've got all the information, you know everything. How am I gonna tell you that my property is not worth what you're sending me, even though I don't think it is or I disagree? One of the best tools that we've put out there, and really our GIS team put out there, is the ability to filter and turn on this layer of recent sales. And so I've updated this slide. The purple is our most recent 2019 sales. The red is 2018, and obviously our study period went back into 2018, so that might also be relevant information. But for example, if you lived in this neighborhood, I believe this is in Jordan, you could pretty quickly identify all the properties that have recently sold, what they sold for, and maybe gauge really is your value seem incorrect or not. So we encourage you to do that. And then there's also the state has a department, or the Department of Revenue has created the electronic certificate of real estate value search function online. And in this example, I've shown Scott County, Helena Township, the completed ECRVs that were submitted, and then I use the date for our sales study range for residential property. And you can see it'll give you kind of a list, tell you when it sold, who was the buyer, who was the seller, what was the sale price, and then if you click on any one of those ECRV ID hyperlinks, pages of information regarding the transaction. So this is another way, once you can either use it to identify sales, or when you've done that on our GIS, to go and dig into those. And so this is a typical appeal process. Usually we send these notices out in March. We want you to call us, or typically we ask you to come in. We're urging you and saying don't come in because staff is not available to meet with you face to face right now. So don't come in and talk to us. Please call us first, and that'll kick off a process. I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide. But then depending on what's listed on your notice, you either have a local board or an open book. There's some uncertainty as to how those are going to work this year, depending on Department of Revenue's guidance. We know that at the very least, the process will be a little bit different, but more information to come on that. And obviously, there will still be, if somebody shows up to those meetings that are on the notice, the time and the date and the place, there's going to be somebody there to, at the very least, take information and follow up with people. And then we have our county board in June. And important to note is if you're in a local board area, which is specified on your notice, you do have to go there in order to maintain eligibility at the county board. And then tax court, you can skip all the steps and go straight there. So again, for the gold notice, April 30th this year. For the purple notice, April 30th of next year is your filing deadline. So for this year, again, we want you to give us a call. Don't come into the office because if anything, you're just going to run into our notices out in the hallway. If you do talk to someone, more than likely they're just going to give you contact information, the best person to call. Those notices have specific appraisers based on where your property is located and what property type it is. So you're going to get the best possible person if you call the number on the notice. And it's our goal right now. I mean, we know we're going to still conduct a fair process, and we're going to make sure everybody's concerns are heard. We've been set up in our department to work from home for quite some time, so all of our appraisers are at home. You won't even know the difference when you call them because everything goes through their computer. We're limiting some of the inspections, particularly interior face-to-face inspections. So at this point, we don't plan on doing those. We may ask to do an exterior review without interaction, and we may ask you if you have some issues with your property, some conditional issues or things that need to be repaired. We may ask you to snap some photos and email those to us. That might be how we address that this year. And I think that's in line with a lot of what our neighboring assessors are planning. But again, we're still waiting for guidance from Minnesota Department of Revenue. And depending on what they advise, we may or may not want to even seek legislation, emergency legislation or something, so that people don't lose their appeal options based on statutory dates that do exist. And then I just have some additional information that if the value's right and the system's right and there's really no relief through an appeal, there may be a program available to you depending on your situation, your age, your disability, whether or not your land type, your property type. So these are some examples. We have a lot of information on this. We're happy to share more. And the only one that I'm going to dig into just a little bit is the special property tax refund, because a lot of people still don't understand that there is no income requirement. So there's a regular refund and a special. And the special one, generally speaking, if you own and lived at your house January 2nd, 19 and 2020, your home's net tax increased more than 12%, and it was at least $100, and you didn't make improvements to impact that value change, you probably, or may qualify, I should say, and you should probably dig into it. So with that, questions or comments, please?
There's any questions?
Mr. Chair, just a great presentation, thank you. We'll probably ask you the same questions over, so thank you for being patient with us when we do that. And I always feel good about sending residents to the office and having them call, because I know that they're gonna get their questions answered, and you and your staff work with them to whatever extent we can. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna ditto that, because there are times when, I'm not giving out your number, but I'm just, call Michael T, call Michael T. Well, there's a name, call Michael T. No. I do say, hey, there's a name and number on your, go there. But then Michael T. And I too do feel good. I mean, I don't, who likes paying taxes, but I do feel good that we're gonna give everyone a fair look, gracious in a response, and that's all I can ask. And so I too feel good about that. So thank you both, looking at Cindy here and Michael T behind the podium.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mike, John?
Commissioner Beard or Commissioner Ulrich, any questions?
No questions. Thank you. It was an excellent presentation.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. So that was for informational only, so no roll call needed on that one, right, Tracy? All right, let's move on to item number 9, committee reports and commissioner updates. Should we start with in person or on the phone? What's, yeah, let's, they're ready to go. So how about Commissioner Beard? Can we start with you for commissioner updates? Or Commissioner Ulrich?
Yes, just a note here, most all of my committees have either canceled or gone call-in, and I anticipate all my committee assignments being either call-in or canceling going forward as well. So I had a limited report here on the 4th, the Parks Commission, the 6th, the Scale Executive Committee, the 13th Scale itself was canceled, the 11th, MICA, which was a call-in meeting. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much. Is Commissioner Beard online?
Commissioner Beard?
Did we lose him?
We may have lost him in transition.
He's been out of town, so he.
Yeah, I'm kind of anticipating him to challenge the, when we adjourn, but that's a whole nother story. I'm gonna look to my right. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky, please.
All right, well, I have a nice long report since I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'll just go through things to get them on the record. February 18th, attended the Beacon facility tour after the board meeting. February 19th, I had a meeting with George Brewston from Guild Incorporated, talking about some of the ways Guild currently works with Scott County residents and some thoughts for the future. February 20th was the Library Board of Trustees meeting. February 21st, Dakota Scott Workforce Development Board meeting, a lot of talk about the legislative session, workforce development issues, because with the current labor market, or what it was at that time, was a big issue. February 25th, attended the Fish Faith Breakfast. I thought it was a great breakfast focused on foster care, child neglect and abuse, healthy families. February 25th, I attended the Scott County Mental Health Local Advisory Council and the Live, Learn, Earn Education Ed Prep Subcommittee. February 26th and 27th, I was at the AMC Legislative Conference and was able to speak in person with all of our state reps and senators about our platform items. And then February 29th through March 4th, I was at the NACO Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. Did meet with the Senate staff and with our Congresswoman Angie Craig about some of our transportation matters. March 5th, attended the Together We Can subcommittee meeting. Also on March 5th, I attended investiture for a new First District judge who happens to be from New Prague, Pat Buren, but he's going to be working out of Goodhue County, but great to get new local judges on the bench. March 6th, I attended the canvassing of the vote for the presidential primary as our board representative. Also on March 6th, I attended the MELSA Finance Committee meeting. And later that evening, the Shakopee Chamber annual event. March 10th was AFSCME Labor Management Committee meeting. Good to get that committee back meeting. Of course, during negotiations, we weren't meeting, so it was good to get around the table and work and communicate about those issues. March 10th was also my meeting with the county administrator. And on March 12th, I attended a meeting about technical education, working with the CDA and the school districts in Jordan and Belle Plaine on some ideas and hopes they have to do some more in that area. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the 9th, I had planning and zoning. I had just a couple things that got approved. On the 10th, Newmarket Township and Cedar Lake Township, they had their annual meetings. Lots of good discussion at those. On the 11th in the morning, there was a Rotary meeting, Prior Lake, that I attended. Very good speaker that day. Also met with the Savage Police Chief after that, Rodney Seward, just see what they're planning on. And, you know, it's funny, this was just on the 11th of last week, so 6 days ago. Everything that was said then was it's out the door like 3 hours later. So anyhow, with then after that, I was in St. Paul for the MESB meeting. Went over to the Capitol for a little bit and was going to go in on a Parks meeting and maybe a couple others, and everything was already postponed. So and as this week, I think they're closing that down pretty quick here. That evening, I was out in Belle Plaine for their, they had a Belle Plaine annexation meeting about a asphalt plant in Belle Plaine Township. That's going to be open for about 240 hours. And the big change over this year from last year is that they'll open start at 6 in the morning instead of 7. And then on the 12th, I-35 Solutions Committee. We met, I chaired the committee. There was, our chairperson was, had another engagement. Talked a little bit about some of the things going on with the new construction down on Lake Street and how things are going on 35 there. Everything's on schedule. Later that evening was at Euphoric for they had Hamlet, like a little open house there. Very nice venue out there. If you haven't been to Euphoric, it's a very nice little, make their own beer, and actually the root beer is the best, I think.
It's really good.
It's really good root beer.
So, and then I went to Elko Newmarket for their monthly meeting, gave them a report on a couple things happening in the county, including the coronavirus. I looked at my phone on my car when I left that meeting, and everything I had said had already changed again, so things are happening very quickly. Then Spring Lake Township had their monthly meeting. Also on the 16th, Prior Lake City had their workshop that was mostly coronavirus. I think they talked a little bit about some parks and some other things there, but yeah, mostly they're planning for this deal. And I would just say, you know, for people that call or whatever, watch our website. We have you know, it was said earlier, look at the website. I've been sending out emails, maybe you guys have too, that we get from the state and the federal people. And, you know, looking forward, most of my meetings, as Commissioner Ulrich had mentioned, are probably going to be either on the phone or postponed or canceled. So that is my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Beard, are you there?
Hello?
There he is.
There he is.
Oh,
Let's let's roll through your commissioner update if you don't mind.
Sure. I have nothing to report.
There you go. Perfect. Then I will go from there. And I had quite a bit of domestic air travel, going to see the kids before they were supposed to ship off to Africa and South America for missions. But as you may imagine, that is now on hold. But on the 3rd, I was able to meet with Leslie for our monthly administrator meeting. The 13th, the White House had the conference call after they announced the national emergency we are now in. 15th, I'm very glad I snuck in. I didn't sneak in, I badged in. Just to see us, our staff, working in a way to ensure continuity. 16th, Prior Lake was, as was mentioned, which was when they declared their emergency and all the COVID fun stuff, which is not very fun. That concludes my report. Leslie, anything from you?
So just a couple things. You know, I know we've talked a lot about, but you know, the county is an essential service provider as well as an employer, and so trying to balance those it's hard, and there's a lot of concern in our workforce, and we're working the best we can. You know, we have stressed that at-risk people is defined by CDC and MDH, stay home, and we have stressed telecommuting and working from home wherever possible, but we do have some positions where we just can't do that, and so we're doing the best we can to put protocols and cleaning and safety in place for those folks. And as several of you said, it's flexible and it is changing by the hour sometimes what CDC and MDH are recommending. So just asking for the public, you know, to be as flexible and patient as well. We're going to do our best to get those services there. We as well have canceled, you know, all events, all large gatherings, some of the things that we've. Excuse me.
No, I might be getting a little interference.
Right now.
So anyway,
That's us, I think, reverbing.
That's reverb, that's why I put it on mute.
Not me, I'm being real quiet down here.
yeah, we have canceled, you know, all events, committee meetings, advisory committee meetings, things that are not transactional by the board. We are not even allowing our staff to meet in these large groups. We are going to Skype and do those things as well. The board meetings will become very transactional like today was. We are constantly in discussions with our neighboring counties. Several of our legislative delegation have asked what they can do, and we keep pushing them on. To me, DHS has been noticeably absent in this, in waiving some of these dates and timeframes. And so anyway, one of them, though, I'm going to ask Ron, and maybe he was planning on anyway, was to update on the courts. I've watched some things on Facebook about jails and things like that, and I just want to clarify those things publicly between Ron and Luke so folks know what we're doing in those areas.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. I was going to address that. I did hear a rumor that we were basically opening up the jails and letting people out. That is completely untrue. As Captain Haas indicated earlier, government's primary function is public safety. And basically this whole meeting today was talking about public safety and what the county is doing to address public safety here in Scott County. And that goes to the court system also. Last week, the state court system laid down some guidelines as far as prioritization of cases that will go to court and how to deal with those to minimize people crowding into the courtrooms and crowding the hallways of the judicial center. Based on that directive from the state, we did prioritize our cases with the local judiciary and figure out how we were going to go about that. Based on those conversations, a couple people were released from jail who would have been released from jail anyway if they would have had their case heard that day or not. So those individuals were released. A couple individuals were released to go to their treatment program. So we got them out of our jail and into their in-treatment program. Some other individuals were not necessarily released, but they were sent to other counties that had warrants on them that we were holding them for other counties. So they were released to their warrant holds and transferred to their counties that they should be transferred to. So rest assured that the people that need to be in jail are in jail. Law enforcement in Scott County will continue to arrest people that need to be arrested, and my office will continue to prosecute people that need to be prosecuted. There's absolutely no change in that we will continue to prosecute people and protect victims' rights and keep the people in jail that need to be in jail.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that clarification. All right. Is it time to adjourn already with all of this?
I better also clarify that we do not need to meet for attorney-client.
Perfect, perfect. We're gonna assume that. All right, we're to that point. We will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We got a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there any entertaining discussion that I'm anticipating for this adjournment as I look to the phone?
Give me a minute, I'm trying to think of something.
That's sort of what I thought.
Tried to mute you.
Tracy, take it away, please.
All right, Commissioner Weckman-Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
I suppose.
Commissioner Beer,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
With that, we are adjourned, and there will be no county board workshop after this meeting.